reading YouTube some information that I found quite fascinating when I encountered it. 3% of the population own half the country's firearms. That's astounding. These are men who are anxious about their ability to protect their families, insecure about their place in the job market, and beset by racial fears. In fact, stockpiling guns seems to be a symptom of a much deeper crisis in meaning and purpose in their lives. Taken together, these studies describe a population that is struggling to find a new story, one in which they are once again the heroes. Why are white men stockpiling guns? I think the biggest thing we have to realize is that the last thing they mention, racial fears, in my opinion, is the biggest of these three issues. The economic insecurities they're facing and the existential crisis they're feeling that they are no longer the man of the house and the breadwinner, I think play secondary and tertiary roles in this. I firmly believe that the racism of this entire narrative is of great import. Now, I have been doing personally just like just a casual glance at survival magazines, which take the entire gun magazine concept and crank it to 11. And over the years, I've looked at these things. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. Every time I find one, I'll open it up, I'll flip through it. You will almost never find anyone holding a firearm inside these magazines unless they're a white man. A white woman is the second most likely person to be holding a firearm. And after that, in a distant third, will be anyone of color. And I don't think I've ever seen a black or brown woman or Asian woman holding a firearm, but I have occasionally seen a black man holding one. And when I've seen that, they're often portrayed as the bad guy. I can only think of one or two times when they're being portrayed as a homeowner defending their property. Now, we know statistically that a firearm in the house is far more likely going to be used against the family members living in that home, either through suicide, which is the biggest bulk of the deaths in America, suicide, from firearms, or as an accidental or deliberate shooting in the case of attempted murder or murder, domestic violence, things like that. And of course, then you have the accidental shootings where people are cleaning their guns or they're doing gun safety and they shoot someone or themselves, or it's an accidental discharge because some kid found a firearm that was loaded, which is just baffling that anyone would leave a loaded firearm accessible to anyone other than themselves. It just amazes me that people don't understand how to handle firearms. You have to assume that every firearm you encounter is loaded. Doesn't matter if you're the only human being on the planet. You pick up a firearm, assume it's loaded. Number one. But these real hardcore homosexuals, 3% of them own half the firearms in America. Think about that for a second. That's tens of millions of firearms owned by 3% of the population. They are prepared for a race war. They are prepared for shooting their neighbors and their fellow American citizens. Oh, probably not people they think of as neighbors and American citizens, mind you, but they are. They're prepared to go to war against anyone that isn't this color. And that's warped. That is a sign of a severe mental imbalance. Now, the gun magazines, for example, have been ramping this paranoia up for decades. They are filled with fear-mongering. Fox News, full of fear-mongering. We saw that same fear-mongering during the Katrina floods of New Orleans, where cops prevented black people from leaving flood zones at gunpoint because they were afraid that black people were going to overwhelm their communities and destroy them. Racist news reports convinced people that there were black people wandering the streets, raping and robbing and killing. And we see this kind of narrative again and again. The violent black man is so dangerous that if a cop sees one holding a cell phone, they shoot and kill them in their own backyards. This is so fueled by racism that it is astounding that anyone cannot see it. Now, I'm going to end on a slightly better note. Remington is going belly up, and I hear Colt is close. Remington's filed Chapter 11, and it looks like Colt may file Chapter 11 as well. Because you see, gun sales are down right now. Why? Because there's a Republican in office. And the paranoia I mentioned is only fueled at its peak when there is a Democrat in office. Because they could say, Obama's coming for your guns, even though after 8 years, no guns were taken from anyone by an Obama administration. Even though people even then, of course, were gunning down children in their schools. It's the last major school shooting we had in Parkland. They gunned down kids who could speak for themselves. And those kids are marching for their lives and starting a political movement that I'm hoping will get change in America. Because we don't have to destroy the Second Amendment, but we have to protect ourselves. And many other countries out there allow firearms. And they have close to no murder rates based on firearms, and they have no mass shootings. And we need to move in that direction. And we need to get into the heads of these 3% and figure out what's going on and pull it apart. And we need to hold the NRA responsible for what they're doing and the paranoia they're ramping up. The gun magazines, the survival magazines, they're all fuel for the fire that the NRA started. And we need to hold them accountable. We can't live like this anymore. And the reality is, of course, because we live like this, some of us don't get to it all.